A 30% budget cut across all excavation sectors? Are you completely out of your mind, Mr. Stern? I slammed the heavy leather folder onto the polished glass conference table, my blue eyes flashing with a mixture of raw indignation and absolute panic. I was Kyrian Wood, the 25-year-old senior relic appraiser at Ethelgard Corp. Charismatic, universally loved by the staff, and blessed with naturally wavy blonde hair that always looked perfectly styled. I usually handled every corporate storm with a dazzling smile. My clients loved me, my team adored me, and I could close a multi-million-dollar historical artifact deal with a single handshake. But today my golden boy optimism was completely failing me. Because sitting across from me was Alister Stern, the newly appointed CEO. Alister was 29, a legendary crisis manager and a walking human glacier. He was devastatingly handsome in a severe, dark way. Midnight black hair styled with mathematical precision, sharp grey steel eyes behind thin rimless glasses, and a posture so rigid his tailored charcoal three-piece suit looked like iron armor. He never laughed, never partook in office gossip, and spoke exclusively in a quiet, ironical, and deadpan business tone. But I didn't just see a modern boss. When I looked into his cold grey eyes, my soul shivered with memories of a past life from 3,000 years ago. In that ancient world of myths and magic, I was the supreme high priest of light, who sacrificed his soul to protect the realm. And this man sitting across from me, reviewing spreadsheets, was the High Demon King who had tried to consume humanity. We had fought a war of blood and ash, and in the end, I had plunged my holy sword into his chest, sealing us both into the wheel of reincarnation. And now he was my boss, and he was using modern financial laws to legally torture me. This was truly the terrifying reality of the second coming of the boss. The metric data dictates that your department is highly unoptimized, Mr. Wood, Alister spoke. His voice was a smooth, low, and terrifyingly calm baritone that cut through the boardroom like a razor. He didn't even look up from his screen. You rely entirely too much on intuition and spiritual feelings to evaluate historical sites. Ethelgard Corp runs on financial logic, not ancient folklore. Your funding is restructured. Accept the parameters, or file a complaint with human resources. Folklore, by hissed, leaning over the table, my hands waving frantically. That folklore brought in a $12 million profit last quarter. You can't analyze the magical residues of history with an Excel spreadsheet, Alister. Some artifacts possess a soul. Alister slowly raised his head, his sharp grey eyes locking onto mine through his lenses. His face was a flawless, emotionless mask. He adjusted his glasses with one long, pale finger. An artifact possesses market value, Kyrian. Alister retorted smoothly, using my first name with a sharp, sarcastic edge. Nothing more.
Your methods are a high-risk liability to our shareholders.
Mine are calculated. Enjoy your afternoon. You have until 5 o'clock to rewrite the budget proposal. Perfectly.
Without the dramatic outbursts.
Internal monologue Kyrian. I hate him. I absolutely, deeply, fundamentally despise him. He remembers our past life. I know he does. He's using his modern, executive power to punish me because I sealed him away 3 millennia ago. Just you wait, Demon King. I am going to break that icy exterior if it's the last thing I do. 7:30 p.m. I was lying on my sofa in my apartment, my blonde hair messy, staring at my phone in absolute, bone-crushing exhaustion. Rewriting that budget proposal to Alister's impossible robotic standards had drained my soul. My hands were shaking from too much caffeine. I need to fake my own death and move to Mars. I groaned into a pillow. Sound effect. A sharp upbeat text notification ping. I picked up the phone. It was a message from Julian, my chaotic best friend and a prominent art gallery owner. From Julian. Text. Kyrian, you've been a stressed ghost for 2 months because of that new CEO. I am not letting you die in your apartment. I set you up tonight. A high-end, completely private blind date at the Obsidian Lounge downtown. 8:30 p.m. He's successful, highly intelligent, elegant, and looking for a serious partner. Go. Wear something nice. I let out a heavy sigh, rubbing my temples. A blind date? The absolute last thing I wanted to do was perform social maintenance for a stranger. But Julian was right. If I stayed home, I would just spend the entire night visualizing new ways to stab Alister Stern with a fountain pen. Fine, I muttered, standing up and opening my closet. At least a stranger won't ask me about variance reports. I picked out a sleek, dark blue button-down shirt that brought out the color of my eyes, left the top 2 buttons unbuttoned, and styled my blonde hair into a neat but loose wave. I grabbed my coat and stepped out into the rainy city night, praying for a quiet, boring evening. The Obsidian Lounge was the epitome of high society luxury. Deep velvet booths, dim amber lighting, and an atmosphere that screamed old money. I walked inside, shaking the raindrops from my coat, and approached the hostess. "Reservation for Julian's party," I said, offering my most charming, polite smile. "Ah, yes. Your partner is already waiting for you in the corner booth, sir. Follow me." She smiled, leading me through the labyrinth of private partitions. My heart did a small, nervous flip. Julian had mentioned this guy was successful and sharp-witted. Just be normal, Kyrian. Don't mention spreadsheets. Don't mention the office. The hostess stopped in front of a secluded, deeply shadowed leather booth near the back window. "Have a wonderful evening," she whispered and slid away. I took a deep breath, stepping around the mahogany partition, a bright, eager, and perfectly practiced smile forming on my lips. "Hi there. I'm Kyrian. I hope I didn't keep you." The words died in my throat. The air was violently, brutally sucked out of my lungs. Sitting in the dim amber light of the booth, a glass of expensive vintage whiskey in his long, pale fingers, was Alister Stern. He had discarded his strict charcoal office jacket, wearing just his dark silk vest over a perfectly tailored black shirt. His midnight hair was still immaculate, and his thin, rimless glasses caught the glow of the table candle. Alister looked up as my voice cut through the air. In a fraction of a second, his flawless, emotionless ice-king mask completely shattered. His sharp grey steel eyes widened in profound, unadulterated shock. His fingers tightened around his whiskey glass so hard I thought the crystal would crack. "Would?" Alister rasped, his deep baritone voice cracking slightly, completely stripped of its usual corporate control. "Stern?" I shrieked, slamming my hand onto the edge of the leather booth, nearly knocking over the candle. "What the hell are you doing here? Are you tracking my location now? Is this a new HR disciplinary tactic?" "Tracking your location?" Alister sneered, his shock instantly transforming into a cold, furious glare as his jaw tensed. "My associate told me he was introducing me to a brilliant, cultured expert with impeccable taste. He neglected to mention he was sending me a loud, hyperactive, blonde nightmare who thinks a budget proposal is a creative writing exercise." "A nightmare?" I gasped, my face burning with pure rage and absolute humiliation. "Julian told me I was meeting a sharp-witted gentleman. You're not a gentleman, you're a human refrigerator. I can't believe my blind date is the most arrogant, insufferable bastard in the corporate world." Alister stood up abruptly, his tall, imposing frame casting a heavy shadow over the table. He grabbed his coat, his grey eyes burning holes into mine. "This meeting represents an absolute 0% efficiency rate. I am leaving." "Sit down, Alister," I hissed, grabbing his forearm before he could step past me. The physical contact sent a sudden, wild jolt of familiar energy through my veins, the residual spark of light and darkness colliding. "If you storm out of this lounge right now, Julian and your associate are going to ask questions. They are business partners. If they find out we had a massive blowout, it will affect our corporate PR metrics. Sit down." Alister froze. He looked down at my hand resting on his arm, his chest rising and falling in a heavy, controlled breath, his analytical mind quickly realizing the social liability. With a slow, deeply resentful sigh, he slid back onto the velvet cushion. "Fine," Alister whispered, his grey eyes locked onto mine through his lenses. "We stay for exactly 20 minutes to satisfy social protocol. We do not speak of the office. And tomorrow morning, we pretend this disaster never occurred." "Agreed," I glared back, sitting down across from him and crossing my arms tightly. 20 minutes. And if you use the word optimize once, I am throwing this ice bucket right at your perfect face. 10 minutes passed in a suffocating, hostile silence. Neither of us touched our drinks. I stared out the window at the neon city lights, my mind spinning. It was a statistical impossibility. Out of millions of people in this city, Julian had managed to pick him. Alister picked up his whiskey, taking a slow, measured sip. "Your hair is messy, Kyrian," he murmured softly, his tone completely flat, yet lacking its usual corporate edge. "It's raining outside, Alister. Spontaneous weather happens. I know you prefer the sky to be formatted in a spreadsheet, but I can't control the clouds." I snapped back without looking at him. Alister let out a short, quiet, and strangely sharp breath, a sound that was almost a laugh. He leaned back against the velvet sofa, his long fingers tracing the rim of his glass. 3,000 years later, and your defense mechanism is still exactly the same. Alister spoke quietly. My head snapped back around. My blue eyes widened as I looked at him. The dim candle flame flickered between us, casting a warm glow over his sharp, sculpted profile. He wasn't looking at me, he was staring into his amber liquid. "What did you just say?" I whispered, my heart suddenly hammering against my ribs. "You always babbled when you were nervous, High Priest," Alister said, slowly raising his head, his pale grey eyes locking onto mine with an intense, ancient, and heavy gravity that completely stripped away the modern CEO. "In the white marble halls of your temple, before the war started, you used to lecture me about the spontaneous beauty of the sun while I was organizing my legions. You haven't changed at all." A cold shock ran down my spine, followed by a sudden burning heat. You remember?" I breathed out, my voice shaking. "You've remembered the entire time. Since the day you took over Ethelgard Corp." "Of course I remember," Alister murmured. A cold, elegant, and dangerously attractive smirk crossing his lips as he adjusted his glasses. "Did you truly think I would forget the man who plunged a holy sword into my chest and forced me into a 3 millennium slumber? I took this IO position specifically to restructure your department, Kyrian. Consider it a late payment invoice for the ancient seal." "You petty, arrogant demon king," I burst out, leaning across the small table, my face inches from his. "I sealed you because you were trying to burn down the eastern provinces, and now you're using corporate budgets to get revenge." "I was not trying to burn the provinces, you foolish priest," Alister countered, his voice dropping into a dangerously deep, low baritone that vibrated straight through my chest. He leaned forward too, closing the distance until I could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "I was consolidating the ley lines to prevent a magical collapse. But you never looked at the data. You just saw a demon and decided I needed to be purified." "You were terrifying," I hissed, my eyes locking onto his lips before snapping back to his grey gaze. The proximity was driving my senses crazy. The ancient magnetic pull between our souls, the absolute synchronization of light and darkness, was flaring to life in the small booth. "And you were loud," Alister whispered back, his grey eyes darkening with an intense, hidden passion that knocked all the words out of my lungs. He reached out, his long, pale fingers slowly moving across the wooden table until his thumb gently brushed against the side of my wrist, right over my pounding pulse. His touch was burning hot. "But in this world, there are no temples, Kyrian, and there are no holy swords. There is only this company, and whether you like it or not, your timeline is completely tied to mine now." I stared at his fingers on my wrist, my breath hitching, my entire body trembling from the overwhelming chemical and magical reaction. The 20 minutes had passed long ago, but neither of us moved. Internal monologue. Kyrian. This is a nightmare. A corporate, reincarnation nightmare. I am supposed to hate him. He's my ancient enemy and my current boss. But looking at him right now, without his cold mask, I don't want to run away. The war is over. But a completely different kind of danger has just begun. Of all the appraisers in the central database, you were statistically the least qualified to handle an unstable artifact. Yet, here we are. Alister's cold, razor-sharp baritone sliced through the cramped interior of the luxury Sov. He was driving, his long, pale fingers gripping the leather steering wheel with absolute, mathematical precision. He had discarded his tailored charcoal suit jacket, sitting in just his crisp white dress, shirt, and dark silk vest. His profile looked brutally sharp against the dark, flashing lightning outside. "Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Stern. Next time our company accidentally uncovers a 3,000-year-old ceiling vault from the mythic era, I'll make sure to stay in my cubicle and let your precious spreadsheets appraise it. I snapped back, crossing my arms tightly and glaring out the passenger window. My blonde hair was slightly messy, my blue button-down shirt collar loose. You forced me onto this expedition as a punishment for my budget report. Don't act like I wanted to be trapped in a car with the former Demon King for 5 hours. Alister didn't flinch, his grey steel eyes fixed firmly on the flooded mountain road ahead. I brought you because your soul still carries the residual resonance of the High Priest's holy light. If the artifact wakes up, your presence acts as a temporary containment buffer. It is a calculated allocation of resources. Nothing more. A buffer. I let out a harsh, sarcastic laugh. You're unbelievable. You haven't changed at all. You still treat everything like a chess game, Alister. You did it 3 millennia ago, and you're doing it now with corporate funding. And you still rely on emotional outbursts instead of analyzing the environmental parameters, Kyrian. Alister retorted smoothly, his voice dropping into a dangerously low, clinical drone. Whoa? I gasped, gripping the dashboard as the massive vehicle slid sideways, tires churning uselessly against the thick mountain mud. Alister handled the steering wheel with terrifyingly calm, time-altered speed, forcefully bringing the SUV to a halt on the shoulder of the dark, isolated forest road. The engine sputtered, let out a heavy hiss of steam, and died completely. Total silence enveloped us, save for the furious hammering of the rain on the roof. Alister slowly turned his head toward me, his grey eyes piercing through the dim amber dashboard glow. Optimization status: 0. The mountain pass is flooded, the satellite navigation is offline, and our transport is physically incapacitated. What is your spontaneous vision for this scenario, High Priest? I slammed my forehead onto the leather dashboard with a dramatic, exhausted groan. My vision is to jump into the ravine so I don't have to listen to your voice anymore. We have exactly 1 vacant unit left, gentlemen. Take it or spend the night freezing in your car, the grumpy old man at the Mountain Lodge desk had told us. And now we were standing inside room 10 of the Summit Rest, a dreary, outdated wooden cabin that looked older than the corporation itself. The air smelled faintly of pinewood, a dying fire crackled in the stone hearth, and right in the center of the room, mocking our ancient enmity, was a single, massive 4-poster bed. Alister stood perfectly rigid by the door, holding his leather executive briefcase like a shield against the rustic environment. His sharp jaw was tightly clenched, his grey eyes scanning the singular bed with intense, calculating disapproval. I will occupy the armchair, Alister stated firmly, his rigid corporate drone returning with a vengeance. Alister, you are 6'2" and that armchair is made of wicker, I sighed, stripping off my wet outer coat and throwing it near the fire. I collapsed onto the edge of the mattress, running a hand through my damp blonde hair. Look, we are adults. We are corporate professionals. And after our disastrous realization at the lounge last night, we already know we can't escape our past. We stay on our respective sides. No magic, no office politics, no ancient grudges. Alister stared at the mattress through his glasses, his analytical mind processing the lack of viable options. With a heavy, deeply resentful sigh, he finally took off his glasses, placing them neatly on the wood nightstand. He unbuttoned the top 2 buttons of his black shirt, exposing the sharp, elegant lines of his throat and chest. Without his lenses, his grey steel eyes looked strikingly vulnerable and infuriatingly attractive. He slid into the far left side of the bed, lying perfectly straight, his arms crossed over his chest like a fallen god carved from marble. The silence stretching between us in the dim amber glow of the fireplace was thick, suffocatingly heavy with a sudden, intense awareness. Alister, I whispered into the quiet room, staring at the wooden ceiling beams. What, Kyrian? His low baritone murmured back through the dark, devoid of its corporate edge. In the old world, on the final day of the war, before I drove the holy sword into your heart, what were you going to say to me? The sky was falling, everything was burning, but you just looked at me and smiled. Why? A long, agonizing pause followed. The only sound was the crackling of the firewood and the steady patter of rain against the glass window. I thought he was going to give me a deadpan business deflection. But slowly, Alister turned his head on the pillow, his grey steel eyes locking onto mine in the dim light. Because I knew that if I died by your hand, your light would be permanently bound to my darkness. Alister sat quietly, his voice stripping away every single layer of his modern pseudo armor, exposing a raw, heartbreaking loneliness. For centuries, the entire world feared me. My legions obeyed me, the gods cursed me, but you were the only one who ever dared to march straight into my throne room, look me in the eyes, and treat me like a living being, even if it was to kill me. I didn't smile because I was winning, Kyrian. I smiled because I knew that in the next life, you would have to find me again. My heart did a painful, violent, and utterly unauthorized flip. I turned onto my side, staring at his sharp profile. The arrogant, ruthless Demon King who had tortured my department with spreadsheets was just a deeply scarred, intensely devoted soul who had waited 3,000 years just to sit across from me in a boardroom. I'm not trying to purify you in this life, Alister, I whispered softly, my voice dropping into a tender, passionate warmth as I reached my hand across the blanket, my fingers stopping just a millimeter away from his knuckles. You don't have to hide behind the data anymore. I see you. Alister's breath hitched. Slowly, deliberately, he flipped his hand over his long, pale fingers firmly wrapping around mine, intertwining our hands with an intense, burning heat that made my entire system malfunction.
Go to sleep, Kyrian, Alister whispered softly, his grey gaze locking onto mine with an unyielding intensity. The vault opens at dawn.
The ancient ceiling vault of the Dawn Temple was majestic. Buried deep within the heart of the mountain, towering white marble pillars, now cracked and covered in moss, stretched up into the shadows. In the center of the chamber sat a floating, crystalline artifact, radiating a faint, dangerous pulse of pure mythicura light energy. The structural integrity of the seal is deteriorating at a rate of 5% per hour. Alister analyzed, his corporate persona firmly back in place as he stood near the altar, adjusting his black-rimmed glasses. It's not deteriorating, Mr. Stern, it's breathing, a smooth, arrogant voice interrupted from behind us. We turned around. Standing near the entrance was Julian's younger brother, Ethan, a highly ambitious, incredibly handsome 23-year-old lead archaeologist who had been assigned to our field team. He had messy dark blonde hair, an athletic build, and a confident, radiant smile that instantly screamed alpha. He marched straight past Alister, stopping right inside my personal space, his amber eyes locking onto mine with an immense, unmistakable amount of flirtatious admiration. Senior Appraiser Wood, it is an absolute honor to finally work with you. Ethan beamed, taking my hand in his. He didn't just give a standard professional handshake. He held my hand with both of his, leaning in close, his voice dripping with charm. Julian told me your intuition with mythic relics is flawless. I have read all your essays. I was hoping that after we stabilize the crystal, you'd allow me to take you out for a private dinner. I'd love to examine your theoretical methods more closely. Internal monologue, Kyrian. Oh. Oi. He is laying it on thick. He's totally trying to flirt with me to get a direct corporate endorsement for his excavation firm. Just play along, Kyrian. Keep the professional ties strong.
Archaeologist, Ethan.
The temperature inside the ancient temple vault plummeted to absolute zero. Alister slowly marched forward, his tall, imposing frame completely blocking the light from our flashlights. The terrifying, heavy dark energy of the Demon King erupted from his shoulders, so thick that Ethan instantly took a step back, gasping for breath under the sudden, suffocating gravity. Alister stepped directly between us, his massive frame physically breaking Ethan's grip on my hand. He locked his grey steel eyes onto the younger man, his face a mask of absolute, lethal, possessive rage. Mr. Wood's administrative time is an exclusive asset of Ethelgard Corp's executive division. Alister spoke, his deep baritone carrying an unyielding, terrifying stillness that echoed off the ancient stone walls. His schedule is completely optimized for relic synchronization, not social entertainment. Your flirtatious variables represent a high-risk liability to this expedition. If your focus remains unoptimized, I will personally terminate your firm's contract before the hour ends. Kyrian, pack the scanners. We are moving the artifact now. Ethan gaped at him in sheer, unmitigated terror, completely crushed by the raw, dominant alpha authority of the CO. I apologize, Mr. Stern. I will focus on the data. I leaned back against a marble pillar, my face burning a deep, joyous crimson. as I watched Alister coldly dictate the safety parameters to the terrified crew. The clinical, robotic boss who claimed human relationships were a myth had just completely weaponized his executive power out of pure, primitive and defensive jealousy. And right then, looking at his broad shoulders, I knew I didn't care about the corporate rules anymore. I wanted him. Permanently. The seal! The core is overloading. Ethan shrieked in panic, dropping his tablet as the floating crystalline artifact in the center of the altar suddenly flared with a violent, bleeding crimson light. The ancient magic of the Dawn Temple was reacting to the foreign modern technology. The ley lines beneath our feet cracked open, glowing white-hot as a massive shockwave of temporal feedback blasted through the cavern, knocking the security guards to the ground. Debris began to rain down from the stone ceiling. "Kyrian, get out of the chamber! Now!" Alister roared over the sound of the roaring energy storm, his glasses flying off his face as he lunged forward, trying to reach me through the blinding light. "I can't leave the artifact, Alister," I shouted back, my blue eyes flashing as the High Priest's dormant light magic fully awakened inside my chest. The golden aura of my soul erupted outward, fighting against the bleeding red curse of the altar. If this crystal explodes, it will wipe out the entire mountain pass. The structural calculations are failing. We have to stabilize it together. Alister didn't hesitate. He dropped his briefcase, sprinting straight into the blinding torrent of energy, ignoring the danger to his own life. He reached the altar, his strong, warm hands slamming down over mine right on the surface of the burning crystal. The physical contact was an absolute explosion. The moment our energies touched, the chaotic crimson light vanished. A magnificent, roaring supernova of synchronized gold and dark blue temporal magic erupted from our intertwined hands, completely flooding the cavern. The ancient contract of light and darkness, the perfect equilibrium we had never achieved in our past life, finally found its balance in the modern world. The ley lines stabilized. The earthquake stopped. The crystal settled into a normal, calm and beautiful pristine white glow. The crisis was averted. I dropped to my knees on the stone floor, gasping for air, completely exhausted. Alister immediately fell to his knees right in front of me, his large, trembling hands cupping my face, his grey steel eyes wide with frantic, overwhelming worry as he scanned my features. "Kyrian, look at me. Are you hurt? Did the feedback drain your life clock?" "I'm whole, Alister. Just need you to approve my vacation days after this," I breathed out, a weak, happy laugh escaping my lips before I completely collapsed forward against his broad chest. Alister wrapped his powerful arms around my waist, pulling me securely against him, his chest heaving with pure, intoxicating relief as he buried his face into my blonde hair. "You absolute, reckless priest," he whispered, his deep baritone shaking with a raw, fierce devotion. "The vacation is approved, for the rest of your life." Returning to the glass skyscraper of Ethelgard Corp felt like stepping onto a fresh battlefield. The primitive magic of the mountain ruins was gone, replaced by the sterile, terrifying efficiency of corporate politics. "The documentation submitted by the auditing committee is absolute nonsense, Mr. Stern." I marched into the Grand Executive boardroom, throwing a thick folder onto the heavy glass table. My blue eyes were blazing with defensive fury, my blonde hair swept back, my yellow tie loosened at the collar. We had barely been back from the mountains for 24 hours. But a corporate coup was already in full swing. Alister sat at the head of the long table, his tailored three-piece charcoal suit immaculate, his black-rimmed glasses resting on his sharp nose. His face was a flawless, unreadable Ice King mask, but his fingers were slowly tracing the surface of his vintage silver watch. Standing near the projector screen was Marcus, a bitter, high-level director from the competing archaeological faction, wearing a smug, arrogant grin. "The files do not lie, Mr. Wood," Marcus sneered, pulling up a series of financial logs on the main screen. "Mr. Vice President, look at the expenditure metrics from the Dawn Temple expedition. Alister manually approved a $3 million emergency budget override for Kyrian's department without the board's authorization. Furthermore, the ancient artifact they brought back is highly unstable, causing localized energetic interference in our server rooms. Alister Stern is letting his personal bias cloud his professional logic. He is a liability. He needs to be removed as CEO." My heart hammered violently against my ribs. personal bias. Did Marcus know about our connection? Or worse, did he know about our past life? The expenditure was a calculated risk mitigation strategy. Alister spoke, his smooth baritone dropping into that absolute, deadpan, and terrifyingly calm drone. He didn't look up from his screen. The artifact required immediate stabilization. If the temporal core had collapsed, the entire eastern provincial sector would have experienced an infrastructure blackout. My decision saved this corporation $12 million in potential liabilities. Your decision was unauthorized. Stern, Marcus barked, slamming his fist onto the table. The board of directors is executing the rebirth clause in your contract. By 5:00 p.m. today, you will be stripped of your executive clearance and Kyrian will be blacklisted from the appraisal industry forever. Unless, Marcus leaned in with a venomous grin, you turn over the artifact's core control codes to my department. The room went dead silent. The heavy ticking of the wall clock felt like a countdown to our execution. I looked at Alister. His jaw tightened so hard I heard his teeth click. The ghosts of his past. The ancient war where he was feared, sealed, and left completely isolated by the world, was staring him right in the face through these corporate politicians. He was ready to sacrifice his career just to protect me. I will submit my immediate resignation, Alister whispered, his voice a flat, hollow drone as his fingers reached up to slowly take off his glasses. Mr. Wood had nothing to do with the override.
Leave him out of the parameters.
No, you damn well won't, I shouted, my voice slamming into the glass walls of the boardroom, my hyperactive golden boy energy turning into an explosive, protective rage. I stepped straight in front of Alister, physically blocking Marcus from looking at him. Mr. Vice President, this entire audit is a fabricated frame-up. Marcus didn't discover a data leak. He manually triggered the artifact's resonance from the lower basement routers on Tuesday night to cause the server interference. Marcus went pale, his grin twitching. That is an absurd, unoptimized accusation, Wood. You have zero data to support this. Think like a pragmatist, Alister. I turned around, looking straight into Alister's grey steel eyes, my voice carrying an absolute, unyielding trust. You're the master of data optimization. If someone used our network to trigger a Mythicura seal, where would the physical analog backup be stored? Alister blinked, his sharp eyes widening behind his lenses as my chaotic energy forced his frozen, defensive brain back to life. A dangerous, brilliant spark of the Demon King returned to his face. He shoved his glasses back onto his nose, his fingers flying across his tablet. The central junction box in the server core. The physical routers keep an analog print of every single magical and digital frequency input connected to the main grid. It takes exactly 8 minutes to compile.
Do it, I cheered, turning back to the shocked board members with my maximum sales charisma.
Mr. Vice President, give us 10 minutes. If we don't bring back the real traitor, you can fire us both. 4:52 p.m. 8 minutes before the deadline. We were inside the cold, glowing server room in the basement. Alister's pale fingers were moving with a ferocious, blinding speed across the terminal, his grey eyes scanning lines of ancient mythic code mixed with modern encryption. I stood right behind him, guarding the door, watching the progress bar hit 90%, 95%, 100%. Beep. The laser printer whirred to life, spitting out a single sheet of paper. Alister snatched it, his eyes tracking the timestamps with mathematical precision. Got you, Alister murmured, a cold, majestic, and dangerously handsome smirk crossing his lips. We marched back into the executive boardroom, slamming the double doors open at exactly 4:58 p.m. I threw the printed log directly over Marcus's forged legal files. Here is the physical network router log from Tuesday evening, sir, I announced, my voice carrying the absolute victory of a top-tier closer. The frequency override didn't come from our mountain expedition. It was transmitted from a mobile device physically located inside this building.
And the registration ID belongs to Director Marcus.
Marcus turned as white as a sheet of paper, his files slipping from his trembling fingers as the vice president snatched the log. The VP's face twisted into absolute rage. Marcus, your own device. Security. Escort this man out of the building immediately. Hand him over to the Federal Fraud Bureau. As Marcus was dragged out of the room screaming, the VP turned to the two of us, letting out a massive sigh of relief. An immaculate optimization of resources. Gentlemen, the artifact stands, the decentralized energy project is approved, and the chairman's bonus belongs entirely to the two of you as the ultimate team. Congratulations. The boardroom erupted into wild applause from the actionary. I turned around, my blue eyes bright with pure, ecstatic joy. Forget the corporate rules, forget the protocol. I lunged across the space, wrapping my arms tightly around Alister's neck. Alister caught me securely by my waist, lifting me slightly off the ground right in front of the entire board of directors, a rare, radiant and incredibly beautiful human smile finally breaking through his stone mask as he held me tight against his chest. At 00 p.m., the Grand Executive Office was completely empty. The harsh fluorescent lights were turned off, leaving the room illuminated only by the warm, amber glow of the city lights streaming through the giant panoramic windows. I was sitting on the edge of my desk, my blonde hair slightly messy, my blue button-down shirt unbuttoned at the collar, my tie discarded onto a stack of signed contracts. Alister walked over from his private lounge, smoothly holding 2 cups of fresh mint-infused espresso. He had left his jacket and glasses behind, his black silk vest tightly fitting his broad shoulders. The final metrics have been logged, Kyrian. Alister murmured softly, setting the cups down and stopping just 2 inches away from me. His grey steel eyes were filled with an intense, burning warmth that made my stomach feel entirely too light. The market valuation of Etherguard Corp has increased by 34% this afternoon. As a closing team, our synchronization index is officially uncalculable. Is that your official administrative evaluation, Grand Stern? I teased, a soft, happy laugh escaping my lips as I reached out, my fingers gently tangling in his dark hair, pulling him closer.
No, Alister whispered, his strong, warm hands sliding around my waist, pulling me securely into his firm, unyielding embrace until our chests were perfectly touching.
This is an absolute, permanent rebirth contract. The war of 3,000 years is officially over, Kyrian. I don't want an enemy anymore. I don't want a spreadsheet to keep me safe. I just want to spend the rest of my timeline with you. Approved without any modifications, I whispered, my eyes fluttering shut as he leaned down, his lips melting into mine in a passionate, deep, and lingering kiss that sealed our futures together forever. The spreadsheets were gone, the hidden shields were shattered, and the cold Ice King had finally found his perfect, chaotic harmony.